Welcome back to the Inside Canes recruiting podcast presented to you by Caneswear, your ultimate destination for all your Miami Hurricanes needs. I'm Luke Chaney, joined as always by Stephen Wagner. Stephen, coming off of signing day, a drama-free signing day, I think we can say, which is the best news that we probably could have gotten yesterday from Miami's 30 commit class. Just some quick stats before I turn it over to you. Miami's class is ranked eighth in the country, uh, 67% blue chip ratio, led, of course, by Jackson Cantwell, the top recruit in the country. Um, Not a whole lot of unexpected that happened yesterday, which, like I said, is probably for the best. We were monitoring a couple of situations down the stretch. A couple of schools were trying to make some late runs at some Miami commits, such as LSU with Jalen Waters, but nothing came to be from that. Um, Steven, I guess just generally your overall thoughts on the recruiting class or the signing class that Miami put together this cycle.
I mean, Mario did it again. Mario proved that he is a really, really, really good recruiting head coach that any program wants on the recruiting trail. He knows how to form relationships. He knows how to sell a vision. He knows how to recruit in the NIL era and make things beyond just money. I mean, obviously, money matters for everyone in this day and age. We can't be naive and act like money does not factor into each and every player's decision to sign with each school that players sign with. But Mario has found a way to very consistently make sure that his teams can be as competitive as anyone else. Even if financially, Miami's not always going to have the most on the table. Obviously, Miami has a very, very good NIL situation, but Miami definitely swings above their weight class in terms of the level of player that they are able to get from the high school class, considering what their NIL resources are. Obviously, Miami went out and had some late additions this year. They were able to go out and they were able to get a Gavin Mueller, a Milan Paris, a Logan Nagel. Keyshawn Stansel came out of nowhere, really fell into the Hurricanes' lap. I think Miami ended up adding 10 signing. Excuse me, 10 of Miami signees committed to the Hurricanes at some point this fall during the actual season. I mean, that to me is pretty impressive. We came into the year with 20 Miami commits. Hurricanes are finishing the class with 30. Top to bottom, this is a really good class. There are some areas that I'm sure Miami would have liked to address a little bit better. Obviously, running back, Miami wanted to take two backs. They ended up only taking Javian Mallory. I think part of that was kind of because they were kind of involved in this little dance with Derek Cooper, where Cooper was obviously committed to Texas. I think at some point this spring, I think at some point this spring and summer. Miami definitely thought that they were going to get Derek Cooper until Texas really came out of left field and made this, really, really aggressive push to be able to land him. Obviously, Miami turned their attention to Amari Latimer, but hindsight's 2020. If I'm looking back at it, I'm probably thinking, man, that was probably a little bit too late. The Hurricanes even hosted him for a secret visit at one point this fall. He got down for one of Miami's games in the second half of the season. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which one it was. But we thought that there was a pretty good chance that he was going to be able to get down for Miami's regular season finale against NC State. But the whole family ended up getting sick. It was kind of a debacle. But still, we really thought it was going to be either Miami or Wisconsin in the final, I'd say, 24 hours before his commitment. But all of a sudden, in the last 10 hours before his commitment, West Virginia starts emerging as a really, really popular name with a lot of buzz building around it. Rich Rodriguez apparently did a lot to be able to make sure that he was able to fundraise within the last 24 hours. Had heard that Rich Rodriguez did quite a bit to go out and get some of West Virginia's boosters on board to convince them to want to spend a little bit more in NIL. So West Virginia ended up making a really, really big push down the stretch. Was able to get that done. But I mean, top to bottom, I mean, this is a really, really good class. And this is a class that really didn't have a lot of drama. I mean, pretty much everything that happened in the final week and a half or so was expected. It was stuff that we were kind of anticipating was probably going to end up happening. You know, a week before signing day, it started becoming pretty apparent. Nolan Wilson's probably not coming here. Anthony Jones probably isn't. Lamar Brown probably isn't. Bryce Perry Wright probably isn't. You know, they're probably not going to be able to get, you know, that major whale. Well, there's not going to be any drama there. Carson Bush and Amari Latimer really start emerging as really kind of the last two names that we are monitoring and expecting Miami to potentially land. Carson Bush, he gave Miami a commitment on Monday. Just waited until Wednesday so he could be able to announce on signing day. Amari Latimer, though, that was really kind of the one name that we were monitoring and going into signing day. And, you know, we were saying on the board, you know, man, I guess maybe like a narrow guess toward Miami, but definitely nothing has been locked in. No decision's been made. This could still go a number of different ways, and ultimately it just ended up not breaking Miami's way, which you know, unfortunate for the Canes, but I can't exactly say that it was a surprise. I think there was, you know, absolutely a very, very real chance that he was going to end up somewhere else. It's just that, quite frankly, I thought he was going to end up sticking with Wisconsin. If he didn't end up at Miami, I thought he would end up sticking with Wisconsin. His older brother plays for the Badgers, but I mean, West Virginia, I mean, those damn Mountaineers, man, out of left field.
Yeah. And looking, well, I mean, just speaking of Wisconsin, I mean, Miami was in that two-team race with Wisconsin for Carson Bush, the former linebacker out of Louisville, linebacker formerly committed to Louisville, I should say. That was the only pickup that Miami made or the only new pickup that Miami made on signing day. And Steven, we've spoken a bit about Bush in this last week or two, a guy that Miami really got super involved with very late in this process, or more so involved with late in this process. Just from what you've seen from Bush on film, what do you like about him, and what do you think Miami really likes about what he brings to the field?
I mean, really, it's got to be his consistency and his dependability. I mean, he is someone who you know exactly what you are getting from him. I mean, on every single down. And I think he's someone who really fits Corey Heatherman's system. You know, really disciplined, very smart, moves very well laterally. I think could be a really good traditional Micah Will linebacker, you know, kind of one of those middle linebackers. Miami did want to try to add a second middle linebacker in this class, but until Carson Bush decommitted from Louisville, it really looked like Miami was probably just going to end up signing J.J. Edwards from Orlando, who was probably projecting best as a will linebacker. But all of a sudden, Carson Bush decommits. Miami goes out and gets him. Miami had been really, really involved with him in October. They made a very aggressive push for him through the month of October, but they just really weren't able to get any, you know, sustained momentum. They offered him October 1st. They tried like hell to get him to campus. That never materialized. It really felt like whenever Miami lost to Louisville, who he was committed to, it felt like that was kind of the nail in the coffin to to Miami's chances with him. Particularly because he's a kid who's actually from Louisville. You know, he lives in the city. Both of his parents are Louisville fans and Louisville season ticket holders. And his head coach's son is actually the tight ends coach at Louisville. So it just seemed like, you know, man, there's a billion connections here. Like that makes way too much damn sense for him to just end up sticking with Louisville. Well, he decommits. Wisconsin emerges as the front runner. Miami isn't totally certain at first if they're going to go ahead and go this route and get involved with him. Then they decide. I think it was the day before Thanksgiving, Miami decided, no, let's go all in. Let's really try to get this kid. They get him down for a last-minute official visit. Things really pop on that official visit. Miami closes the gap with Wisconsin almost immediately by the time that he leaves on Sunday. I talked to him Sunday night, and yeah, Miami was definitely even with Wisconsin. It was kind of one of those things where we could see it going either way. Well, by the next afternoon, by Monday afternoon, Miami had emerged as the very clear front runner. And he goes ahead, commits to Miami. We kick our feet up wait until signing day, and then yesterday afternoon he goes ahead and announces his pledge for real.
Great last day get for Miami. Just looking at how their class compares to some of their counterparts within the ACC, you can really see Miami start to build that gap of talent, or build that talent gap between themselves and some other schools within the ACC. I mean, they're just recruiting and accumulating talent at a level that no other school in the ACC really is at right now. I mean, Florida State put together a respectable class as well, but just the quantity of blue chip prospects, Miami frankly dominated them in that regard. And Clemson's not recruiting at the same monstrous level that they once were in the pre-NIL era. So you can really see Miami just kind of build that talent advantage, which I think we'll see take place on the field more so in the next couple of years. Steven, I'm curious, man. I guess talking about a few class superlatives. The first one that I want to ask you about, we'll call this the Malachi Tony Award, for freshman who is most likely to make a very large impact in their freshman year. I have a feeling who you're gonna roll, who you're gonna choose for this one, but who do you think is most likely to make that sort of, or make a somewhat similar impact in their first season?
Well, the no shit answer is going to be Jackson Cantwell. He's
Yeah.
the number one player in America. He is literally the best high school football player in the country. You hope that that kid can come in and play right away and have a really high impact right away. I mean, he is going to be on the Francis Maui Noah track. He is track. He is, his expectations are going to be come in, start right away. He'll probably look clunky in the spring. I'll just say it because I remember one time. Just kind of talking with some I was just talking with some people who were, at Miami's first spring practices. Francis Maui, or whenever Francis Maui Noah got to campus, Francis Maui Noah did not look great that spring. In fact, he was pretty clunky. He was really refined. He was a or as far as high school recruits go, he was really refined. He was a 5-star level talent. Everyone agreed this is one of the best offensive tackles in the country. He came to campus and there was work that needed to be to be done. And it was pretty apparent pretty quickly, hey, we are going to have to work with this kid through the spring. He can get there, but he is not ready to step on the playing field literally this exact second. He will be by the fall, but right now he's got some work that needs to be done. Especially if you're going up against someone like Ruben Bain, who also exploded in that class, or you're going up against veteran college pass rushers. I think that Jackson Cantwell, it'll probably take him a little while to adjust, probably the spring. And then in the fall, he's going to go ahead, he's going to, barring injury, he'll start every game. He'll be at Miami for 3 years. He'll be a first-round NFL draft pick. And in the 2029 recruiting class, I'm sure that we'll be having the same discussion whenever Miami's going after the next monster 5-star offensive tackle to follow that path too. If we're going beyond Jackson Cantwell, because that one's way too obvious, I would say a player who I really, really think people are going to kind of sleep on a little bit or maybe overlook, who really could be a really high level instant impact, or not instant impact, but freshman impact player. I'm going to go with Joel Irvin. And I think it's very, very possible that he ends up kind of following, the Inez Cooper, Matt McCoy type track, where his freshman year he's not maybe necessarily a full-blown starter at the start of the season, but by the midway point of the season he's able to get in the game. He's able to contribute. If I remember correctly, I think Matt McCoy and Inez Cooper ended up first seeing the field as sixth offensive lineman whenever Miami would bring in some of these really heavy jumbo sets, and that was kind of the opportunity for them to first get on the field. And then all of a sudden, while they're getting some snaps at guard throughout the game with the actual first stringers. I could absolutely see Joel Irvin following that exact same path. And who knows, maybe by the end of the year, he's able to actually develop into a starter. Miami is able to start 2 true freshmen offensive linemen. The Hurricanes have done it before. Now, obviously, Miami's going to be losing some talent from its roster this year, especially from its offensive line. This is a veteran, experienced offensive line group that is going to lose, some really high end talent. And Miami's proven, they really try not to lean very heavily on the transfer portal for building offensive lines, outside of maybe going ahead and going out and getting a center. Which they've had to do each of the last 3 cycles, but still, that's one piece as opposed to 4. I think that a place like Miami is set up really well for good offensive linemen to potentially have opportunities to see the field kind of early, and I think that's kind of where Joel Irvin kind of works into this thing. I really like Ben Congdon a lot too, but I think that Congdon is probably going to be one of these guys who has a little bit of a higher overall ceiling, but maybe isn't as ready to get on the field now. I think Joel Irvin is ready to get on the field now. I think that Joel Irvin I shouldn't say now, but will be ready to get on the field this fall. I think he's a little bit closer to being ready to actually see the field than necessarily Congdon might be, even though Congdon's a really, really good lineman too. I also think that Joel Irvin has been playing against a higher level of competition in high school than Congdon has, but obviously, Congdon is a very good offensive lineman as well.
And before we get into our next couple of superlatives, let's take a moment and hear from our friends at Caneswear.
Welcome to Caneswear. New store, new items, same great experience. Family owned and operated since 2010, Caneswear has the latest merchandise from the Miami Hurricanes, Miami Dolphins, Florida Panthers, Inter Miami CF, and more. Come visit us at our store in Davie on University Drive, just south of 595, or online at caneswear.com. Caneswear, the spot Miami fans shop.
Steven, who do you think, we'll say down the stretch, we'll say this fall, what was the biggest out of left field recruiting win for Miami that maybe, at some point you didn't see coming that they ended up finishing on?
Keyshawn Stansel, 100% Keyshawn Stansel. Everything that we had heard, in every single recruiting circle, had said that Miami ship had sailed for Stansel this summer whenever he committed to Clemson. The Hurricane, that was done. Especially because Clemson also requires all of their commits to actually completely shut down whenever they commit to them. They're not allowed to go on visits anymore. That's kind of been the Dabo Sweeney special for a little while now. But Stansel completely came out of nowhere. So basically, what ended up happening was he commits to he takes an official visit to Miami over the summer. It seems like he's going to commit. Ends up not committing. Some things didn't end up working out. So that summer, or the rest of the summer and going into the fall, one of Miami's personnel staffers, Trip Carrico, just kind of keeps in touch, continues this dialogue, continues this communication with him until all of a sudden, kind of like mid-November-ish, Keyshawn Stansel starts showing really very serious interest in the Hurricanes. Miami thought that they shot their shot and failed earlier in the year, and they thought that was a done deal. But whenever they get wind that Stansel actually is really interested in them, first thing they do is they look at his senior tape. They say, wow, he's got really good senior tape. He's got really impressive senior tape. We feel really good about this kid. This was a kid that we wanted all along, and now we've got the opportunity to just go ahead and add him. And almost kind of out of nowhere, Stansel kind of the way in which he flipped kind of said to me that Miami was where he actually kind of wanted to be all along, because he flipped to Miami without taking a fall game day visit to Miami. He didn't visit Miami until the last game of the season. He'd visited his junior, but he didn't actually visit this year until the last game of the season. So for something to happen that quickly, I think that indicates that Stansel really did actually want to be at Miami. It was just kind of a matter of waiting for the right timing and waiting for the right moment. But whenever the opportunity emerged for Stansel to join the Hurricanes, he jumped on it. So that one was definitely the biggest surprise that kind of came out of nowhere. Gavin Mueller, that was a name that we kind of started hearing about a month prior before he committed. He was kind of growing on Miami's board. James Dunnigan, he didn't commit to Miami right away, but Miami was obviously one of the top contenders there. I think Colorado was in the mix for him too. But he was someone that Miami had a little bit of communication with back in the spring, so that wasn't completely out of nowhere. Carson Bush, that one was definitely a little bit of a surprise. Obviously, you can look at the defensive linemen that they landed. Ike Chukra, Logan Nagel, Frederick Santius. They'd been on those guys for a little while. Nagel, they were trying to keep his recruitment quiet because obviously they didn't want Pittsburgh to know that Miami was coming, but Miami ended up that ended up getting leaked. That ended up going public. Not too long after that, Nagel ends up flipping to Miami. So we can't exactly say that was one that we just absolutely did not see coming. So I would really say that Stansel's probably the one that was most surprising to me, just because like the way that it ended up happening, or the timeliness of how it ended up happening was just so it really was unique. It was something that I really, really did not see coming.
In every cycle, there seems to be a 3-star or just a less hyped up recruit that steps in or that's arrives at Miami and we'll say plays above the recruiting expectation. I mean, at 24, you had OJ Frederick, who was I believe a 3-star, who started on day one at corner for Miami. Dante Simpson was a 3-star defensive lineman in last year's class, who played a bit towards the end of the season and really projects as someone who we can expect to be a part of Miami's defensive line rotation for the next couple of years. Who is that, we'll say 3-star in this year's class, that you think has a good chance to surpass those recruiting expectations?
Yeah, well, in previous years, I feel like this would have been a little bit easier because there's a couple of players who end up kind of being late risers, due to they're not maybe necessarily as highly ranked early in the year, but they kind of rise their stock a little bit later in the year. This year, Miami jumped on those dudes who ended up being the late risers. Samarian Wingo, they had him locked in earlier in the year, but he ended up being a dude whose stock absolutely just freaking skyrocketed. Gavin Mueller, I really, really like him a lot. He was another dude whose stock just absolutely skyrocketed during the fall. DeAnthony Lafayette, right now he's a pure pass rusher and sort of a one-trick pony in that regard, but someone who I think is going to eventually be really, really good just because the bones of what he can do are there, man. I mean, he's hyper athletic. He's a real star, but also, he's a 4-star recruit. So, if I'm kind of looking in sort of the 3-star range, I think I would take a look at Logan Nagel, the defensive lineman from New Jersey who Miami flipped from Pitt. I think he absolutely could have the opportunity to end up being one of these dudes who finds a way to make an impact. I think he'll kind of be like a 1 or a 3 technique. He'll definitely be a defensive tackle, but I mean, man, looking at him and what he does and what he can do and just his whole body of work, I really like him a lot. And I like Ike Chukra quite a bit in that regard too, because I think that he's very, very much kind of cast from the same mold as Logan Nagel, just maybe a little bit smaller. I think he'll be a really, really good player too. But I mean, you look at the rest of Miami's class. I mean, it's 67% 4-star recruits. So it's kind of hard to say that we always it's such a surprise that this kid is a really, really high impact player. Really, he's a top 300 high school football player in America. He's a 4-star recruit in either the Rivals 300 or the Rivals industry ranking. So it's pretty clear that people thought he was going to be good. So it's kind of hard to point to some of the 4-stars, but if we're looking at the 3-stars, I think I would keep an eye on Logan Nagel and Isaac Chukra.
Okay, sounds good. And then lastly, just looking ahead a bit at the 27 cycle in regards to South Florida, right? I mean, this was a national recruiting effort. And Miami's always recruiting at a national level under Cristobal, but the 26 class more so was more of a national class. Only two recruits, that being West Boca running back Jaden Mallory and Miami Northwestern edge Jordan Campbell, I believe him, if I'm not forgetting anybody, were from South Florida. Miami, of course, was involved with other blue chip South Florida prospects, such as a Derek Cooper, running back out of Chaminade. But looking ahead at the at the 27 class, seems to be a higher volume of these blue chip marquee classic South Florida guys who we expect Miami to be involved with. Just who are some of the players that you're keeping an eye on in this next 27 cycle from the South Florida area that you think Miami will make a run for?
Well, the first one's very obvious. It's got to be Mark Matthews, the 5-star offensive tackle, number 2 player in the country at St. Thomas Aquinas, a school that Miami has worked very hard to try to maintain its ties to. Jason Taylor was the defensive coordinator at St. Thomas before he ended up coming over and joining Miami staff. That's absolutely one of the players that we are going to keep the closest eyes on. Nick Lanier over at Miami Northwestern. He's a receiver who I think will have a really good chance to finish as a 5-star. I think I think his playing style is kind of similar to JoJo Trader's playing style whenever he was in high school. Although I'll be honest, I'm more of a believer in Nick Lanier than I was in JoJo Trader. I was not quite as high on Trader coming out of high school, but I'm really, really high on Nick Lanier because Nick Lanier has been the best receiver on his team, and you might even have an argument the best player on his team at Miami Northwestern for the last 2 years. And that's a Miami Northwestern team that has 5-star blue chip talent on its roster. Calvin Russell's a borderline 5-star depending on the service that you're looking at. Jordan Campbell's a top 300 player. James Johnson was at one point this year a 5-star top 20 recruit. Miami really does have Miami Northwestern really did have a lot of high-end talent. And I felt like Nick Lanier was as good or better than those guys whenever he was an underclassman, whenever he was younger than them. Well, now this is Nick Lanier's moment. Obviously, whenever you play at that high of a level, it creates a certain expectation that you'll somehow be able to take a next step. And that next step can be something that can be kind of hard for some players to do. But I do think that he's going to end up being a really, really good player. I think Zayden Gamble at St. Thomas Aquinas is going to be someone who will keep a very close eye on. If I was making a way too early 2027 mock class, I would definitely be keeping an eye on him. Obviously, Miami has Amari Stevens over at over at Chaminade already committed, so that will be someone who will continue to monitor. It has kind of had sort of an up and down high school career so far in terms of kind of hard to quantify it because he's transferred schools a couple of different times, but he has been a really, really good player whenever we've seen him on the field in pads or in 7-on-7 settings. Moves really well. He's a player who will definitely keep an eye on. Jalen Jones over at MacArthur, now a consensus 4-star top 300 safety. He's top 200 in the industry ranking. He loves Miami. Miami loves him. DeMarcus DeRoche, the tight end from Cardinal Gibbons, who committed to Miami. Very surprisingly, he didn't really visit anywhere else this year. He really did just end up visiting Miami. Then there will obviously be some guys on the West Coast. I can't forget about Julius Jones at St. Thomas Aquinas too. By the way, St. Thomas's 2027 class is going to be absolutely loaded.
Yeah.
Julius Jones, Mark Matthews, Zayden Gamble, Jaden Carey. All of those dudes are 1,000% good enough to be able to play at a school like Miami. We'll be keeping a very close eye on him. Anthony Jennings at Dillard. He's a kid whose stock has continued to rise. Really, really intriguing kid. Jamar Thompson over at West Boca, the defensive tackle, top 150 player. We know how few and far between elite defensive linemen are in kind of the South Florida area, even if we want to go ahead and include Boca Raton and Palm Beach County in that mix, he'll be someone who I think will continue to be very, very, very valued. Tari Miller, the cornerback at Miami Central, I think that's a kid who would make sense to go after. Trezevant Boyd, Miami and Florida State have kind of gone back and forth as his leader, but he's another 4-star that Miami's going to continue to go after. I mean, 2027 does actually look like it should be a pretty good year for South Florida talents, especially some of the high-end talent. In terms of overall total depth, do we want to argue, how good, the players who are going to go to, the Syracuse and the Pittsburghs and the Boston colleges from down here are, as compared to previous years, not really sure if I, quite frankly, just know enough about some of those guys to be able to go into that. But we'll absolutely be keeping a really close eye on the top end talent because, as we all know, Miami has made a very strong effort to go after that really high-end talent in South Florida.
Yeah, there are a lot of marquee prospects, as you said, in the South Florida region in the 27th cycle. We could definitely see the 27 class for Miami being a lot more South Florida more so South Florida concentrated than the 26 cycle was. Also, just a quick note on Amari Stevens before we get going here. He's on his 4th school right now at the high school ranks. He started at St. Thomas, played his sophomore year at American Heritage, started his junior year at Edison, then transferred, hit the midseason portal, which is a thing now in high school football. It's now playing at Chaminade Madonna. If he sticks with Chaminade Madonna for his senior season, we hope that, just the not changing scenery would help him and kind of allow him to have a breakout senior season because, as you said, he is very talented. He is someone that we've seen a lot of on the 7-on-7 circuit, and we think that at least tools-wise, he has what it takes to be a good player at the powerful level, which is why Miami took his commitment so early. But with that being said, that will do it for another episode of the Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. A little bit longer than usual, but if there's anything that we missed, whether it be about the 26th class, whether it's an opinion that you'd like from us regarding one of the 26 signees, or our thoughts on the 27 class and where Miami's might look at for that cycle, be sure to ask us in the Recruiting Storm Center message board on CaneSport.com. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Luke Chaney. We'll see you guys next time.